and chimps have similarities that are not caused by common descent, that notion is not something which is completely anomalous or an aberration to evolutionary biology, as we know, even from a Darwinian perspective, because they know that there are things which are similar,
but what goes against the Darwinian theology is that you're saying the first man was created spontaneously. I guess that's where the difference is.
Yeah. That's exactly the point.
And when do you think this first man was created?
We don't know. We don't have any textual evidence to show when exactly it was created.
Do you have like an idea or a guess?
No. All we have is biblical information. We don't have any like hadith that tells us when Adam was created or something like that. We don't have any Islamic evidence.
How about the earth? Do you believe the earth was created as well? Or?
Yeah, the whole universe was created by God.
And you believe that?
Yeah.
Well, Islamically, that's what they say.
Yeah, so obviously the verse of the Quran is that أَوَلَمْ يَرَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَنَّ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ كَانَتَا رَتْقًا فَفَتَقْنَاهُمَا وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ أَفَلَا يُؤْمِنُونَ in Surah Al-Anbiya, chapter 21 of the Quran, verse 30, where it says that have the disbelievers not seen that the heavens and the earth were together, and then Allah split them apart, and we created from water every living thing. Do they not then believe? وَجَعَلْنَا فِي الْأَرْضِ رَوَاسِيَ أَن تَمِيدَ بِهِمْ.
But what has that got to do with the earth?
Yeah, so we believe that the earth and the universe, the heavens and the earth, were all created by God.
Right. So it was created at some point in time. And also Islam doesn't have an opinion on how long ago it was created.
No, because the question of how long the earth was, or the universe was created, you know, the word yawm in the Arabic language, according to Al-Isfahani, it means أي زمن من الأزمنة. The word yawm means any time period. Yeah. So when it says sittat ayyam, that the creation of the heavens and the earth were in 6 days, we know that from chapter 69 verse 8, في يوم كان مقداره 50,000 سنة, that a day can be 50,000 years. In chapter 32 of the Quran, it says 1000 سنة مما تعدون, 1,000 years. So a day can be 1,000 years, it could be 50,000 years. In Surah Al-Ma'idah, اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. اليوم here could mean less than a day. So, as Isfahani mentions in his dictionary, the word yawm could mean any period of time. It could mean a short period of time, it could mean a long period of time. Another evidence for that...
It could be like an aeon, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so another evidence for that is that the Sahaba asked the Prophet Muhammad one time, what do we do when Ad-Dajjal comes? Ad-Dajjal is, we believe, is an antichrist, yeah? So he said, the first day, how do we pray and so on, yeah? So he said, the first day is going to be like a year. But how can a day be like a year unless it could be described as longer than 24 hours, right? So, and then he said the second day is a month and so on. So when the Quran says 6 days, we don't know the length of those days. For sure. I mean, there's some guess.
Well, then that's a very strange way of using the word day, because the word day usually just means like 24 hours in most languages, I assume.
It could mean that as well.
Because in English, for example, we don't have the use of like day as in the sense of aeons.
Yeah, all right. So that's the difference between the Arabic language and the English language. So,
but that would be peculiar to the Arabic language, because as far as I'm aware, I don't know any other language that has the idea that the day is longer than 24 hours.
I don't know all the languages of the world, so I couldn't give you.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they have it in French or.
I'm pretty sure that in Hebrew, like old earth creationists of from the Bible, they argue the same thing. They say the day is epoch, and they use a language. Kind of evidence base for that.
So it sounds like Quranic Arabic is different to the everyday Arabic.
Yes.
That's strange, okay.
What are you saying?
Sorry?
What's your name, by the way?
My name is Mark.
Mark, nice one, man.
Nice to meet you.
So the creation story, if you like, from an Islamic perspective, is radically different from that which you find in Genesis. Because in Genesis you have this very particular kind of chronology, ordering, and so on. In the first day God created the night and the day, and the third day created the sun, and the second day, all of those things. We don't find that detailed chronology in the Quranic discourse. And of course the idea that God rested on the 7 days is refuted in the Quranic discourse.
It sounds like you're just saying you don't know.
What? About what?
Well, regarding the existence of the first, regarding the human, how humans came to existence, and regarding the the age of the Earth. They're saying it sounds like it happened like it's a long time ago, and we just don't really know.
Yeah, I think scientists would say that. Some scientists would say no, it happened 13.9 billion years ago. That is the dominant model now, obviously with Big Bang theory and so on. And we don't reject the fact that there is a possibility that the universe could be 14 billion years old. But for me to tell you that for certain that it did exist for that long would be, I think, intellectual dishonesty. Because we could find, obviously, theories or evidences in the future which counteracts that piece. But from our perspective, we don't have a problem with that. So we don't have a problem with dinosaurs as well. Like a young age creationist, Christian, would see that the idea of dinosaurs is a conspiracy, like, you know, the fossils were thrown in there or something like that. We don't have an issue with it. We don't have an issue with the Earth being 14 billion years old. We don't have an issue with dinosaurs. All of those things are fine for us.
But right, so I'm just trying to figure out. So basically, you don't really know. Is what you're saying regarding the age of the universe and this.
Are you talking about me or the scientific community?
No. I mean, I'm saying the Islamic community.
There's no textual evidences to give you exact dates. We don't have
exact dates. Not even exact dates, like even estimates.
Not even estimates. So in Jewish tradition, you have a Jewish calendar.
Yeah.
Literally, where from the beginning of time until now, that's kind of like, you know, put into calendar format. We don't have such calendar. Our calendar starts when the Prophet migrated. It's called the Hijrah calendar. So we don't have the format of, you know, this is the age where the universe began and so on, and now this is 7,000 years on from that, which is what the Jews some Jews would say. We don't have that. So we just have the generic Quranic text, which is facilitative of a multi-layered kind of understanding of how long the age of the universe, the Earth, and so on is. And it's up to the scientific community to give us theories and propositions for how long that is, and we can look at the evidences on that basis and either reject or accept them. So this is a secular kind of exercise rather than a religious one. And science should not be done through the lens of religion. I mean, the idea of the scientific method is it should be done independent of any religious supposition, right? Because if you have a religious bias and you impose that on science, obviously, then you're going to have a skewed scientific kind of result.
What if you do it the other way? What about like when you've got like blatant errors in the book that people have claimed is like really holy and like...
Do you want to come here so I can see you?
Not really, I'm happy here, but
sorry.
I can move if you want, if you can't hear or something.
Yeah. No,
Say hello to me, mate.
no, because not everyone can hear.
Oh, I repeat. Well, I've forgotten it, you repeat it.
You're saying about errors in the book?
Yeah. Like you're saying it the one way, we should start with religion then move towards science. But I'm saying what happens when like religion is just completely at odds with science?
Yeah, so here's a few things that we have to be clear about. And this is where I think there is becoming an increased understanding of how this works. I think I'm going to mention his name again. Thomas Kuhn wrote a good book on this, the structure of scientific revolution, where we have to be careful as to what extent we give epistemic weight to science and scientific discourse.
Yes.
So one thing I would say is that science is not omniscient or able to discover. Yeah, right. So it's not the only guide to truth, and it has the propensity to be corrigible. It's not something which is actually
Do you
perfect.
think Islam is a good route to truth?
Huh?
Do you think Islam is a good route to truth?
I think Islam, from a rational perspective, requires, like anything else, a discursive rationalization in order for it to be reached. Now, I as a Muslim believe in immediate knowledge of God, right? That's a spiritual, a psycho-spiritual perspective. I say that human beings are born believing in God, and that the Quran and the Sunnah, they basically re-guide human beings back to their primordial state. That's my claim.
Yes.
But from a rational perspective, that's a different discussion. Islam, like any other thing out there, needs to be arrived at not only through spirituality or psychology, although I would maintain that that's enough for me, right? But for others, it might require a discursive rationalization. So the idea that God exists, that the idea that the Prophet Muhammad is a true prophet, like anything else, we say should be rationalized and can be rationalized.
And what is the rationalization for that?
So to start off with God's existence, I'm sure you've heard many kind of arguments, like the cosmological argument, the teleological argument, the ontological argument, the contingency argument, and so on. And so those arguments are meant to show that it's actually rationalizable to believe that God is one, God exists, and
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
So So when you say God, you're sort of, I'll agree. I'll go along with some sort of God, like pantheism or consciousness, yeah. But you sort of have like a Quranic God or like an Islamic God. But what about all the other gods that were created?
Right, so that's a good question.
Thank you very much.
At this point, I'm not talking about the Islamic understanding of God.
My intuitiveness of your speaking, though, is that it is going to eventually arrive at a Quranic God.
No, but at this point in time, when we're talking about a discursive rationalization of God,
Sure.
right? I'm just talking about an idea that revokes atheism. Because atheism is the existence that no God
You agree, though?
is the lack of existence.
You said I can go along with the idea of a God.
Yes.
Right, so he is actually agreeing with you right now.
Right, so that's perfect, if you agree.
But there's another question.
Yeah.
No problem. Now, as our scholars say, you know, we have scholars that there's a very interesting phraseology which is لا مشاحة في الاصطلاح. You can use whatever word you want to use.
Yes.
If you want to use, for the sake of argument, if you want to use the word consciousness or energy or whatever,
I agree.
I haven't got a problem with that. So long as we accept that there is an entity there which is independent, one, immaterial, incorporeal, and...
well,
yeah, go ahead.
I know what you're trying to say. You're trying to say what is the common language of discussing these topics?
What I'm saying is that what do we need? This is the question.
Well, ask him. He knows what he's on about. Ask him.
What I'm saying is, what is required in order to for there to be a movement away from atheism into either a deism or a theism? Because both of those things, deism and theism, are naturally averse to the atheistic thesis. Yeah. So if you believe in deism or theism, you can no longer reconcile that belief with atheism. You can't be a deist atheist, right?
But, yeah, I agree.
Right. So
that's the argument against hardcore atheists. Most atheists say I'm 99% atheist, and they sort of leave open unanswerable questions, and then they try and get into the nitty-gritty of stuff like evolution and sort of like, well, basically just evolution and material physics and things like this.
Well, evolution is a biological phenomena, isn't it? Right?
Yeah, sure.
So we have to first take a step back, because the existence of evolution depends on biology, and biology depends on chemistry, because what is biology? It's the study of living things, right? Yeah. That's what differentiates biology from chemistry, right? And so we can't even start talking about biology unless we've had a good enough discussion about chemistry and physics.
Sure, yeah.
So obviously the existence of the universe predates the existence of human beings, right? And living creatures in that universe.
Yeah.
So I think a proper and a good enough starting point for an atheistic discussion would not be about biology, because that's kind of like a micro aspect. It would be about physics and chemistry.
Can I go the other way? Yeah. I agree with this. I quite like this conversation at the moment. But as soon as you're eventually going to try and walk in the Quran into this conversation, aren't you?
At this point in time, we're talking about...
No, but eventually you're going to. That's where your biases lie.
If you want me to talk about the Quran, I can.
No, I'm going to say you're going to bring it in. Do you know what I'm saying? Do you agree?
Yeah, I can bring in whatever you want me to bring in. If you don't want me to bring in, I won't.
It just seems a bizarre concept. Like, am I right? Am I making?
I know what you're saying.
No, look. I'll have a conversation on whatever you want me to have a conversation on. Right?
No, I'm just jumping in.
No, this is something called poisoning the well, right? If we're talking about God and discursive rationalization, how to arrive at the immaterial, incorporate, independent being, right? That's a conversation.
I agree.
That will take someone away from atheism to either deism or theism, okay?
Yeah.
Or at least to agnosticism, right?
Yeah.
But you can't be an atheist and believe in an independent, deistic kind of conception of God.
We got to one place, and I'm asking, we've got here. Yeah. How are you going to bring in the Quran?
I can do whatever you want. If you don't want to...
Don't. Bring it in. Bring it in. Go for it. Why is the Quran so brilliant? Go for it.
So it's not about a question of why the Quran is so brilliant. I think the more fundamental question is, now we've discussed the cosmos, and if we do agree that there's one God, and that, or call it whatever you want to call it, this entity, this thing that's independent, incorporeal, material, and so on, the question is the relationship between us as biological entities, as sentient beings, conscious beings, and this other entity, is this meant to be a relationship which is personal or impersonal? That's an important question. So I would submit to you today that it seems quite inconceivable that an all-knowing entity would position human beings on this earth with the ability to make decisions in life and not give them a decision to make. It would seem quite a useless thing to do. And moreover, it would seem even more useless for this entity, which is meant to be the all-knowing and most wise entity, for him or for that entity to be itself, or whatever you want to call it, itself purposeless, right?
Haven't you jumped the gun here? Because we all understand.
How do you ascribe purpose? How do you? Sorry.
No, don't mind. You started this conversation. I'm on your side. I'm allied with you.
How do you ascribe this purpose to this creator that you're talking about? Because there is a possibility that it could be purposeless.
Yes.
And some have argued that, like the Upanishads and for example, Arthur Schopenhauer was one very famous German philosopher who argued that that God does exist, but it's a purposeless God. It's meaningless. It doesn't have any. And obviously, he made a philosophy out of it, the philosophy of pessimism. But how does Islam differ from that?
So Islam posits that, and in fact there are verses in the Quran about this, أَيَحْسَبُ الْإِنسَانَ أَن يُتْرَكَ سُدًى, that does the human being think that he will be left purposeless? أَلَمْ يَكُنْ نُطْفَةً مِنْ مَنِيٍّ يُمْنَى, was that human being not a sperm drop from that which was emitted? ثُمَّ كَانَ عَلَقَةً فَخَلَقَ فَسَوَّى, then he became a clinging, clot-like thing, so God then created him and proportioned him. أَلَيْسَ ذَلِكَ بِقَادِرٍ عَلَى يُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى, is this entity not able then to raise the dead, or to create life after death? So the idea is, number one, there are two kind of questions the Quran mentions, and it answers the question itself. Number one, why would God be purposeless? I mean, why would this entity that we've talked about itself be a purposeless entity, right? So the Quran says, لو أردنا أن نتخذ لهوا لاتخذناه من لدنا إن كنا فاعلين. It says that if we wanted to take some, why would we create the universe, right? And so it says, is it for play? Is it some kind of amusement? Is it some kind of activity which is for entertainment, right? And if we wanted to take an entertainment, we would have done that from within ourselves if we were really going to do that. But then God says, بل يقذف بالحق على الباطل فيدمغه فإذا هو زاهق. This is a falsehood claim, right? It's a claim of falsity. You can't say that God, that creates everything with a teleos, right? With some kind of purpose, would do something without any purpose. To be detached from his creation, to be impersonal, to be to be aloof, to be an aloof God, if you like. This doesn't make any sense from that perspective.
Yeah, but it doesn't. Just because it doesn't make any sense, so it doesn't mean you can just discard it. Because so far the Quranic verses you've given me, they haven't mentioned anything about purpose or God's purpose. You just said a sperm becomes a child and then...
No. The verse before, it says, does the human being think that he will be left aimless, right? And the reason why the sperm thing was mentioned is to show that everything in life has a teleos. That the sperm itself found the egg almost in navigatory fashion, right? It navigated itself to the egg. It was fertilized. It went through a process. All of that required guidance, isn't it? So isn't it? If you had a sperm that didn't know where it was going, think about it, right? What would be the result of that? You wouldn't have any life.
That is the process. Well, they have a purpose of knowing where they're going.
No, I mean, obviously the sperm and the egg meet at some point, isn't it?
Of course.
Yeah, so if the sperm didn't know where it was going, imagine if it was like, it had a bad navigation, right? If it had a bad navigation, it would not meet the egg, therefore all of us wouldn't be here today, right? And so the idea is that God fixes a teleos for things, animate or inanimate, whether they have an active intellect or not. And that includes the cosmos and all that's within it. So why did God mention أَيَحْسَبُ الْإِنسَانَ أَن يُتْرَكَ سُدًى? Does the human being think that he'll be left aimless? And then mention sperm. أَلَمْ يَكُنْ نُطْفَةً مِنْ مَنِيٍّ يُمْنَى, he was a sperm drop. ثُمَّ كَانَ عَلَقَةً, then he was developed into alaqa. Alaqa is a clot, that clings on to the uterine wall or whatever of the mother. So if that's the case, there was a whole developmental process that required the divine guidance.
Why does it require divine guidance?
Well, let's not say divine guidance. It required some guidance. Let's just say it's not divine for the sake of argument, right? But if the sperm didn't know where it was going, it wouldn't be fertilized with the egg, right? So it's like it has a special navigation device on it. It knew exactly where it was going. So here, if God, if the argument goes, and you can think about it like this, if God is assigning and ascribing purpose to things with a minimal or if any active intellect, then what about us as sentient beings with an active intellect? How could there be no purpose for us? If in our very inception, you know, our beginning was a sperm drop, and then we had purpose. So how could we not have purpose now?
But how do you extrapolate that from a purpose to a sperm cell?
Because
to a human?
look, the idea is guidance, right?
A human and a sperm cell is quite different.
Look, I'll tell you why. Let me tell you that this is interesting. I was thinking about this verse myself, right? And what I understood from this verse is, if you think about human beings in the maze of life, yeah? We are in a maze of life and we require a special kind of navigation, okay?
We do.
Yeah, well, that's the assumption, right? We're in the maze of life, just like the sperm in the beginning of its life knew where it was going almost intuitively. We would say that was a guidance, a divine guidance. So in our very kind of infant stages, even less before the infant stages and before the genome stage, as a sperm we knew where we were going, and just as we required that special navigation at that time to know where we're going, now we require a kind of special divine navigation to also know where we're going at this point. So that requires,
when you say we, you're including
human
the sperm
beings
and the human being at the same time, but sperm and the human being are very different.
Well, we started off as sperm, isn't it, if you think about it? I mean, if it wasn't for a sperm, we wouldn't be
But its
here.
complexity is incredibly small
I think it's quite different
compared to humans.
When you say purpose, when you say purpose, and you talk about human beings, I think in the everyday language, I think that means something quite different to a sperm going after an egg.
Well, there's similarities and differences.
Yeah.
The similarity is the assumption of guidance. We need to get from point A to point B. For us as Muslims, we believe that there's a spiritual guidance that we require. We're not just here purposeless. If the sperm was a purposeless entity, it wouldn't know where it's going and we wouldn't be here. And we say the same thing. If we are purposeless entities, we wouldn't know where we're going and we wouldn't get anywhere. And so what's required is for us to realize our navigatory purpose in life and to navigate in that direction. And that's what the divine guidance was. So all the prophets, we believe, and messengers, including Noah and Abraham and all those other prophets that you might have heard of, Jesus and Moses, they came to tell their people about this special kind of divine guidance. And really what it is to obey the divine law. Because in the Islamic understanding, everything in the universe is either willingly or unwillingly submissive to the divine command. Including human beings. The only difference is, because human beings
Because that doesn't really explain why there are so many societies which are not religious.
That's a really good question.
It sounds like what you're saying to me, that